Good morning. So, we have discussed about the design principles categorized under abstract. Now, I will discuss about expressions. What is expression? Basically, see, abstract principles are whether you agree or do not agree, people generally follow these rules or this kind of principles. Expression is more connected with the users or even by the designers. I will just come to these points first, then I will discuss one by one. Expressions are listed: spatial, contrast, scale, monotony, overwhelming, mistake, variety, surprise, ecstatic, extravagant. There are many I will tell you. I have just tried to bring which are more connected with my landscape projects. Spatial, what happens is, if you try, you will see that when I will talk about the form or category of the objects or spaces, at that time I will talk about dimensions and other things. But what happens is, the moment you look at the landscape, the spatial expression comes in the mind of the user, and that which is coming to the mind of the user is basically created by you, the designer. Okay? Now, it is open or closed or claustrophobic. If it is too wide a landscape, it is open, and if you find that it is in a limited area, it is closed, and if you find it is too small an area within which I have provided you a landscape project, you might feel claustrophobic. This is purely psychological, though psychological, very much guided by the dimensions. The mental behavior is always guided by all these parameters, where space is defined by, again, the planes and the dimensions, length, breadth and the height, and the vertical base, vertical and overhead planes. If my landscape project is made too small, then you might feel claustrophobic. You know why you will feel claustrophobic? Because you expected the landscape project should be large, open, which you did not get. Okay. Contrast. Contrast is basically the opposite to each other. Then scale. See, when I am talking about this contrast, see, I have said in abstract, I think I have said in abstract as well. The point is, expression is you think it is contrasting. In abstract, it is something is contrasting with respect to what? But when it comes to expression, that you take one as a point of reference, with respect to that the other one is opposite. Okay? The scale here, the scale again will come in my form and categories. The scale here is essentially overall scale of the project. The expression is, it is a grand one. Grand one means it is a large one, but the large one is also maybe open one. Large one may be also closed one. So, if you see that there could be a kind of conflicting situations where you are saying spatial, at the same time you are saying the scale, and if you are saying miniature, miniature may be claustrophobic, and the miniature may be grand again, miniature may be open, for as an example Japanese one. So, the point is that when you are thinking about the scales, you are seeing with respect to the overall expression of the space. When you are talking about the spatial, you are talking about the overall openness of the space, of the landscape space. When you are talking about the contrast, you are thinking in terms of the spatial one, how you express it. Then comes the monotony. See, mind it, all these are not ordered in some importance level. I have just placed it one after another. Monotony. What happens is, in the whole landscape, if suppose you find too many things are almost similar, then you almost get rejected, and you think that why should I really see the entire landscape sites and move around the entire space when I know things are repeated. Or maybe the way the objects are placed in the site, the way the spaces have been organized, you might feel after some time a feeling of monotony in the mind. So, this is all these, that is why is in the categorization of, or so clustered under the expression, how you feel, how the user will feel. Then comes overwhelming. You did not expect something. You came to a landscape project site, and then suddenly you saw it is a wonderful thing, something great. It overwhelms you, and that overwhelming is, you did not expect so much. Now, if I fall back on the same sensation, perception and intellection, if you remember, there I had given a clue. The clue was, you are informed that you are going to see a landscape project. Let us take as an example. Imagine this. You were informed that you are going to see a landscape project, but you were not informed more than that. You have been then brought to the landscape project site, and now as a user you entered and you saw the landscape project is wonderful. You got overwhelmed. There is a awe effect, you know. You say, wow, I didn't expect this. This is what is overwhelming. If you try to measure, very difficult. I'll tell you, it will not be measurable. How much overwhelming? What did you expect earlier? What did you think that the landscape project would be? And what did you see by which you are overwhelmed? Really not that very discretely measurable. Let this be left to the scope of psychoanalysts, not for landscapists. We can only think about how good it is working. Mystic is basically the environment that is created, various elements which are used in the landscape in such a manner that you have a feeling of mystic effects. Okay. It may be sometime you have not created deliberately, but it is only a coincidence that at a particular time when the user has come and he is experiencing that particular landscape, the daylight fact is such, the climate is such, and his mental state is such that it looks mystic to him. So, mystic is also a matter of expression. And I can also assure you, the same user coming on some other time of the day or maybe some other day will not find this that mystic. So, mystic is very momentary, it just suddenly works because of many other items. Variety, when you find, is just, I would say, a little bit of opposite of monotony. In monotony, everything is same, everything is same. The variety is there are different kind of objects with their different characteristics, they are all placed over there. And when you are looking at it, you find that, okay, I have seen this, I am getting another opportunity to see something different, another opportunity to see something different. So, this brings variety. So, here essentially what you have to do is, means when it is monotonous, it is very easy to plan, I will tell you, very easy. You just do a rubber stamping or cloning, it becomes a monotonous plan. But when it comes to variety, then it becomes a slightly, you have to look for a lot of other elements. Surprise. See, there is a picture that I have kept over here. I don't know whether you are surprised to this picture. Is it really a very common sight in a landscape? No, it is not. A wonderful work of a sculptor that he has designed this and ultimately placed in the midst of a landscape. And when you are seeing it, suddenly you get surprised, my God, this is something different, something different. Shall I put it under contrast? Maybe, I am not sure. But the thing is, sculpture is no longer a contrasting element in my landscape. So, here what happens is you see this and then you find, oh, surprised. It all depends whether you find it overwhelming or you don't like it. I don't want to comment on that, but the surprise is suddenly you see something which you did not expect, that is surprising, and something which you did not expect, and if it gives you a very positive result, then it goes to overwhelming. Okay. Ecstatic is like, say, a limit up to which, means the climax is the level up to which you have attained your, say, expression. Ecstatic is you really feel so good after seeing or experiencing certain areas. It may so happen, say in climax what happens, in the landscape project design, generally we take the user from one point to the next, to the next, to the next, to the end point. And at that particular end point, his attraction value, his experience, his liking and everything is, cumulatively increasing, and that particular point is the ultimate. Ecstatic is something slightly different. Suddenly certain element somewhere, maybe in the midst of it, in the whole process, gives you an ecstasy. You like it suddenly. Generally what happens in this, like say, if suppose sequentially you are going through experiences and then you come to a climatic point, after that whatever you see next does not give you that level of likes or liking. That is a climax point, that climax is a peak. Ecstatic is suddenly surge, oh my God, it's wonderful, it's a wonderful thing. Then again you go through other areas like it, but the thing is suddenly you find another one that may create another ecstasy, but they may not be of equal height. So, it is just like spikes, but in climax, if I try to draw this, try to give an idea in some single line diagram, if this is my baseline of experience that I am creating, and you are now gradually taking to the better higher level of liking, pleasure, and then at one point it is reached the top point, that is climax. This is what is climax. After that, whatever you see, it may be either degenerating like this or it may be suddenly falling onto it, but this is the peak that has been created. So, here the situation is this is a start point and this is the end point. So, it came to this particular point and this we consider almost as an end, but in the ecstasy it is like this, that this is a baseline and you are seeing it and suddenly you find that something is good. And basically what I am trying to give is a graph of your level of ecstasy, and then you come here and then suddenly some other you liked it, and it is just like what we have our cardiographs similar, and then at this point you got a very high ecstasy level, and this may match with your climax. I do not know, this may match with your climax, but this is basically we are trying to say in terms of ecstasy. But I am sure about one thing, if this is the ecstasy which you are going to get here, this can never be a climax, never, because climax is the end. Ecstasy can be suddenly a surge, sudden surges that can happen in your mind. So, this is what it is. Extravagant, this extravagance is, what happens is, you remember that economic unity I was talking about, very similar to that. What happens is, everybody is expecting something in the landscape. Each landscape is different, agreed, each landscape is different, each project is different, but what people covet in a landscape, that quantum is probably very, very similar quantity. It is something like that you go to one landscape 1, you like it very much, you go to landscape 2, a different one, you also like it very much. So, if I take like it very much, these two if I try to quantify, probably I will find that you like this also, you like this also, okay. But this is, so the quantum is fairly same, but what happens here is, in this kind of extravagant is, you liked one landscape, you like the other landscape too, but you thought that this second landscape which I liked, probably they have done something which was not required, too much has been done. So, what happens is, if suppose this too muchness is very much apparent in your Italian and French garden styles, too muchness, unnecessary, just put in the landscape, and people like it, because as long as it is something which is away from the normal routine elements, people like it. All the sculptures that they started adding in the Italian and French landscapes, and ultimately carried on with the English landscape, that carried on to our Bengal landscapes as well, or even Indian landscapes as well. The sculpture became a part of it. So, all these were basically extravagant, because I repeat, nature never contributed any sculpture to us in that form, in the figurative forms, which is depicting the history or the religion or say some other, never. Nature given us the sculpture, I will tell you, it did, but in the form of erosion and corrosion of different natural elements. The stone, the stalactites, stalagmites, they are some kind of real good sculptures, people are trying to emulate it. The rock outcrops, people are trying to emulate it. In many of the landscapes I have seen that where they are trying to create an artificial rock outcrop, that means it looks so natural, a sculpture. Okay. Sometime you must have also found that a fossil, a stone fossil, also a sculpture. The thing is, nature has created, as long as it is nature created, you do not mind, you do not think it is extravagant, but once you find that for this particular landscape it was this much was good enough, not more than that was required, and anything that you have put deliberately, forcefully and dominantly, that becomes extravagant. So, everything now then it is related to your mind, how you react to it and how you express this. Then comes a character. This is, when you look at the landscape, you always try to see, is it natural or artificial? By definition, what we said, the landscape should be predominantly natural, not artificial. But the moment you find that certain things had been done, and whether it is extravagant or not, I am not arguing on that, but the thing is, certain things which have been put within this particular landscape, and you are seeing that it is not looking natural, it is looking artificial. So, the character also, it haunts your mind, that is it natural or is it artificial. It is because of which, the moment you look at the Mughal garden you find it to be, it's natural, of course, every element is natural, but you find it to be artificial, because nature will never create such kind of strong axial geometry in the planes. When you go to Italian gardens, though they have tried to exploit or explore the nature, but still people feel that it is forcefully done, forcefully, it's artificial. You create the whole set of nature, but don't follow the rules of the growth of the nature or the development of the nature or evolution of the nature, then it will start looking artificial. So, this is where lies all these parameters which hits us. So, if I summarize this, so basically what happened is, when you are thinking about the principles, you thought about the abstract principles, which is very difficult to quantify and very difficult to contest, yet people agree with it as they are. And there are other principles which are similar principles with expressions, where means how people react to it, how people feel about it, how people construe it, that comes under expression. Next is comes to arrangement of it. Arrangement, form, or the characteristics of the objects, because they are elements, how you place it. But these two, the abstract and expressions, are reflecting the reactions of the user. So, what next? The next you will find the arrangements. Okay? Let me start discussing about these arrangements. Arrangement of what? Object or space? One space next to it, another space, another space, another space, you keep on arranging it. Within that space, objects. If you look at a space as an object, that is also fine, no problem. The space is an object, yes, zone A, zone B, zone C, zone D, my one object. But the thing is, here I am referring to the objects as like the individual entity, not really special, not special. If you see non-special entities, then it becomes a kind of such kind of spaces. Okay, let us see what all are there. Let me just bring in all. Oh, sorry, I'll come back. Okay. First of all, in terms of arrangement, let us see in the landscape how I am going to place it. It can be a single element, one space, possible, or it can be a groups of spaces, multiple such spaces arranged. So, it can be single, it can be group. Other elements, other principles within associated with arrangement is access, how it is aligned. What happens is the whole space, if I show you with respect to this particular picture, in the axis we have options like non-axial, uniaxial, biaxial, multi-axial. Let me clarify. If there is no definite axis, basically are guided by one particular line, straight line, not curvilinear. Curvilinear is also a line, but straight line. If suppose you find that in the whole landscape there is one very definite straight line, then that becomes axis. Now, there may be a landscape in which you do not find such kind of straight lines, so it becomes non-axial. That means you do not have really an axis. That means axis is basically it is a point of reference from start point to the end point, means you are supposed to go from here to there, or you are supposed to look from here to there, or you are supposed to refer from here to there. So, non-axial means a picture like this, where you really cannot find out that in which direction the lines are going, and it is going in different directions. That is non-axial. So, if I say that in my arrangement I do not want axial, so rather I say that I would like to make non-axial, then automatically this will result into similar kind of these landscapes. Chinese, Japanese, they are all non-axial. If you take reference to uniaxial, very rarely I have found that the landscapes are uniaxial. What happens is, since the landscape is, I will just try to give a reference, since the landscape site is usually big, I will draw another very irregular landscape site. I have drawn two. since it is too big and we want this is a start point and this may be the end point, and people should experience the entire thing, then automatically by virtue of the expectations of the people, we go by shortcuts. Once you go there, we try to have different other functions. Then maybe I would like to connect these two spaces, and also these two spaces. Or contrary to it, it may be that I have drawn one line here, and then at the center I am trying to connect this. This red one is very similar to our Charbagh concept of Mughal garden, and the other one is very similar to our Italian and French garden. But there is one thing very common in this: they have axes, multiple axes. It is not uniaxial. Very rarely you will find that something is uniaxial. I am just trying to give a schematic reference to it. Very rarely you will find it is uniaxial, because if it is uniaxial and the axis almost guides your path or circulation movement, in such case what happens is that you deprive others to access this. At the moment you start putting axis, then it becomes transverse axis. This axis means connections and this axis means lines. Okay? So, this is what is uniaxial and this is multiaxial, and if the red line one that you take is a biaxial, and in this case if you find that people are allowed to move in this direction, it is non-axial. But here I am just deliberately doing this. If suppose I have a property something like this, and I want to create a line here and a line here and then make my landscape, then even if the perimeter or the total profile is irregular, I can still make it axial. This has to be understood. See, whenever I am talking about these principles, one thing I would always like to restrict myself from is saying this is right or wrong, good or bad. My objective is not to say good or bad, not to give my judgment. It is just to expose to you what is what. Okay? What happens is, most often whenever you find that there is an irregular geometry within which if you give an axial axis in the arrangement, then it jerks. Then the expression gives a jerk in the mind that such a nice irregular perimeter we had, and suddenly I am being made to walk through a very discrete straight line paths at orthogonal 1. That jerks. Almost everybody has, they have a feeling like this. At the same time, if suppose I will just draw another one, my sketches are, I am trying to do it in the same sheet here so that you can correlate all together and everything remains in front of you. If suppose your property is of absolutely rectilinear and then you entered from here and then you went for this kind of non-axial geometry, whether people accept it or reject it, most often people do not reject it. People do not reject it. The reason is very simple. People may reject this, but may not reject this. Why they should not reject here? Because you have given them an option to experience the whole site, and since they are in different kinetic motions, kinetic directions, the kinesthetic effect ultimately negates the effect of the rigidity of the edges. And that is why people may not think that, oh, it is a rectilinear space, it should have been very much axial, because people do not mind. And at the same time, if suppose within this you create such kind of elements in such a way that people do not have, I am just trying to draw a very sketchy figure. Given the time, I would have drawn probably a very nice figure. Given this situation, what happens is people tend to lose the visual idea of the actual rigid profile geometry. So, what happens is, if you have a rectilinear site or say such kind of sites, you can always negate the effect of the rectilinearity just by virtue of your circulation patterns and designs. Even in this kind of cases, what can be done? Means I have seen, I do not have the example over here, but if you look towards earlier historical example I have given, and please focus at the example I have given for the Jubilee Park, in which the Jubilee Park, I am just trying to redraw the whole stuff. There is, there is a road going like this, there is a road going here, and then suddenly there is a Mughal garden replica and there is a rose garden here. Actual Jubilee Park, if you see, it is of this profile, which is not regular profile, within which suddenly a Mughal garden, very axial, they have placed it, and that particular this axis goes to this one, then again turns to this, and then goes to the water body, large water body, and there are two roads. Nothing else is axial in this except this one, except this small part of it. So, there are different experimentation. You can also try, but my objective is to understand that exactly what we are referring to as axis. Okay? Symmetry and asymmetry, this is another set of principles. See, asymmetry is the opposite of symmetry. Symmetry is what? If you have one particular axial line. One more point, let me clarify. Is the axis very definitely a path? Not necessary. Not necessary. Axis is what your mind construes as an axis. You may not give any path, but the thing is, you can always have the objects over here on the either sides. Now, whenever there is a definition of object, axis, and then you find everything is on either side equally placed at equidistant, or maybe the characteristically equal, there appears to be a symmetry. I am saying in terms of objects, but in terms of space, a profile very defined by an axis or multiple axes, and then everything is same on either side, then it is symmetrical. And then if you have the axis, but the space is over here in terms of its treatment, in terms of its finishes, in terms of its elements, containing elements, they are not symmetrical, they are not same, then in that case it will become asymmetric. I will just try to give an example with respect to this sketch. This is a line, this line is axis. It may be physical axis for circulation, it may be a visual axis, that means you are looking towards this, and then every element on either side is, I am just drawing very sketchily to give an idea. If this is true, that along this particular line everything is just opposite to each other, maybe of different forms, then this is symmetrical. And the asymmetry is just the reverse of it. It is a square here, and then it is a circle over here, and then it may be a triangle over here. Again there is a circle over here, there is a square over here, and there is a triangle over here. Same elements, same pair of elements, but they are placed in such a manner that it is on either side they are different, at this side they are same, opposite to each other. This is what is the symmetry, and this is what is the asymmetry. Again, the question is good or bad? No, no question asked, because the point is, with the symmetry you may create excellent things, you may also destroy a good quality. With asymmetry you may create excellent things, it may be a reverse. Okay? So, the point is not to argue on this is good or this is good. The point is, what is symmetry and what is asymmetry. Essentially, let me summarize till this particular point. Whenever you are thinking about the design principles, you are thinking in three terms. One is the abstract or expression, another is arrangement, whether it is object or space, and there is a form or character of object or space. If you understand the entire set of principles and then try to correlate or relate with any elements that you are seeing around you, it will make the best sense. I am only trying to give you an exposure to this, trying to make you understand, and maybe many of you who are studying these subjects already know about it, and those who are architects have definitely studied about it. I am trying to see this with respect to my landscape, and here basically how it can be made use of it. And here, while discussing this, you will find that I have restricted myself from giving pictures much, because if I start giving pictures you will be distracted. But later on, when I will run a series of pictures, at that time I will try to focus that whatever points that I have discussed, I will try to draw your attention to this as examples. Okay? Thank you very much.